Hey, it's Mr. Ramage, and I'm going to do a quick review today on a few people of the Enlightenment era. The first one that we're going to talk about is John Locke, and what we want to understand is just a few basics. We could really dive into John Locke for hours upon hours and hours, but that would be probably not in our best interest. We need to know the basics, right? So let's focus on some of the basics of John Locke and understand his contributions to the Age of Reason. So John Locke wrote the book Two Treatises on Government, which was published in 1689. And this is going to become an extremely influential piece of work, not only to other thinkers of the Enlightenment, but beyond. And in the Two Treatises on Government, he brings up three major points that I want to talk with you about today. Number one is that men are by nature free and equal. That there exists what's called a social contract between the people and the government. And we need to have toleration. We need to be able to respect differences, especially differences of religion. He also published in the same year an essay concerning human understanding. And the point we want to bring out of this piece of work is that people are molded by their environment and that their brains begin as a blank slate that's filled with experiences. So let's take a look at these in a little bit more detail. In the Two Treatises on Government, Locke talks a lot about natural rights. And remember, this is a big theme of the environment, talking about natural laws, natural rights, and man as a part of nature. Locke identifies man's natural state as one of freedom, that in his natural state, as he originated, whichever way you choose to believe in, he originated in a sense of perfect freedom. Okay, that man had three natural rights, and those rights are life, liberty, and property. Now, if the phrase natural rights and life, liberty, and property sound vaguely familiar, they should. They're basically the wordings of the Declaration of Independence. So we can already see the influence that John Locke and his idea of natural rights is going to play down the road in 1776 when the Continental Congress issues the Declaration of Independence. So the words and the ideas of Locke in terms of the natural rights of man is highly influential. And if those natural rights exist in a free state, that's really important. But on the other hand, living in a truly natural and free state could potentially be very chaotic and very unstable. So Locke believed that there developed over time this idea of a social contract, that people who are born free with these God-given rights will willingly surrender some of those rights to a government to empower that government with their rights in order for that government to then have the authority to create a stable and peaceful environment. And he said that this is done via a social contract, a written agreement between the people of a nation, let's say, and a government of that nation who will take those powers from the people and use those to establish their authority in terms of protecting the rest of the freedoms and rights of the people and creating a society that's prosperous. We can't live in total chaos, Walking Dead style. We need to have some type of law and order. So to achieve that, people surrender some of those rights, empowering the government, giving the government the authority over them to then establish this peaceful country. Again, this should all sound really familiar. The first three words of the preamble of the United States Constitution are, "We the people." We the people give this power to the government. We the people create this government. The U.S. Constitution is our social contract here in the United States. Now, what happens if the government becomes too big? What happens if the government becomes too powerful? What happens if the government takes these powers and responsibilities that we've willingly given them and abuses them? Well, when the government abuses their power, it's time to take that power away. So Locke says if the government begins to abuse the power that they've been given, the people have the right to break that social contract and to form a new government. And that they can do this through a peaceful act or they can do this through a revolutionary act. Okay? So the people feeling oppressed by this government have the right to revolt against said government and to form a new one. So again, John Locke's words are very powerful in terms of influencing the leaders of the American Revolutionary Movement in the 13 colonies. They're aware of Locke's words, they understand this concept, they're feeling oppressed by the British government, and a revolution is justified. The last thing I want to touch on in terms of what Locke wrote about in the two treatises of government is he writes about toleration. This is part of England's history as it went from the Catholic Church to the Anglican Protestant Church under the King's leadership. There was a lot of religious arguments going on, not only in England, but throughout Europe during the Protestant Reformation. Governments and kings and monarchs were essentially forcing people to share the same religious values that they had, and religion became a big conflict in this time period. So Locke says that this is ridiculous. The government should not be enforcing or trying to legislate people's religious beliefs. It's actually quite impossible. Religion is something that's internal. It's not external like a law. We can legislate the speed that you travel on the freeway, but we can't truly legislate what you believe in privately in your own heart and mind. And we certainly shouldn't be legislating how you worship. So Locke preaches toleration, that we should actually have an inclusive society where people are free to explore whichever religious beliefs they choose to explore. It's their choice, and that enforcing these beliefs through any type of government force or law or regulation is just impossible. And it actually hurts our country if we try to do that. If we can simply be tolerant of others and not make a big deal about it, then we're actually going to see positive results from that. And the last point we want to bring up for John Locke, he raises in his essay concerning human understanding, and it's the idea that people were molded by their environment. Locke grew up during the English Civil War and during the Glorious Revolution. These are very important and influential events in his young life. And he believed that when we're born, we are a clean slate, a tabula rasa, and that on that slate or on that clean piece of paper, which is our brains, things are added through our experiences. So that wraps up John Locke. Remember, we want to understand some of his very basic ideas. We definitely are going to see his influence coming up in the other parts of the Enlightenment, as well as the revolutionary periods of America, France, and Latin America. The idea of natural rights is super important, and we're going to see that being used quite literally in the Declaration of Independence. The idea of a social contract as it translates into the U.S. Constitution. Hopefully you've got what you need on John Locke,
and that you understand his role and his influence in the Age of Enlightenment.